This is the first in a series that we're running as part of a new special interest group within our association on teacher education and digital and media literacy. And we hope we're going to have lots more activities like these sessions in the coming weeks on the topic, simply because we know how much interest there is in the topic and how important it is. So let me first of all show you the running order of who we're going to have speaking this afternoon. So as you know from the conference program, we're going to have 4 relatively short talks of between 10 and 12 minutes, starting off with Julian Mc Dougall, who I'm sure needs no introduction, from the University of Bournemouth in the UK, followed then by Alex Le Voci Sayad, who is also, he's from Brazil, but he's working very closely with UNESCO Mill Alliance. Then I'm very happy to welcome Lina Pranaityte from the Heidelberg School of Education, Heidelberg University in Germany, who's on our SIG and one of the organizers of this session this afternoon. And last but by no means least, we're going to have Eleni Kyza, who's Associate Professor in Information Society from the Cyprus University of Technology. So I hope we're going to have a really interactive, engaging session. We're going to take a short moment, maybe after each speaker, just if there's 1 or 2 urgent questions, but we hope we will have some time for good discussion towards the end as well. And we will finish sharp at 3:15 Central European time. So let's move on quickly, and I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker for this afternoon, and that is Julian. So Julian, over to you for the next 10 to 12 minutes.
Thank you, Sally. Hi, everybody. I will dive straight in because we are moving quickly today. I am assuming you're seeing my screen, and it will now be
yes, we see the screen fine.
Screen.
Perfect, thank you.
Ready to go. So I want to set the scene, if possible, for the panel by talking about the urgent need for initial teacher education in digital and media literacy. I'll use the term media literacy, but by the way, it's shorthand, but it comprises all of those various kind of flavors of it. But I want to set the scene, set out the urgency, but also offer quite an ambitious and far-reaching theory of change for media literacy. And this comes from, wow, probably over 20 years now of doing research in the UK and internationally, and running a research centre, which is kind of media literacy, media education organisation. We've developed a theory of change for the more far-reaching uses of media literacy. So I want to talk about what media literacy is, why it's so important in the present moment, which you will all know, and that's why you're here, the urgent need for initial teacher education, but also moving beyond the idea of media literacy solving all the problems in the world, or media literacy skills and competences in themselves being neutral and sufficient, and talk more about what we need people to do with their media literacy once we have enabled them to develop it. And that's the theory of change. So you will not need to tell me, because you just have to live in the world at the moment, that we are in this moment of infodemic, information disorder. We could see that as a perfect storm of confusion, cynicism, fragmentation, irresponsibility, and apathy. And at the bottom of the screen, I've just put together a kind of equation of all the things that I think come together in this moment that mean that the need for citizens to be digitally and media literate is more important than ever. It's always been tremendously important, but arguably more important than ever. But what I want to suggest is that we need to, through initial teacher education and through teaching, enable young citizens to make positive contributions to media ecosystems. So they're not just reacting to misinformation, but they are actively reducing information disorder by making positive interventions in the ecosystem. I will make the obvious analogy, just as many of us would argue that being vaccinated creates a healthier ecosystem during a pandemic. It isn't just to protect yourselves, it's to protect others. And in the theory of change, we argue that media literacy develops into capability, and this uses the work of Sen. When we use it for action and change, it happens in 2 ways. Firstly is how we think and how we are more critical when we're using media and information, for example, lateral reading and other strategies. Some people favour fact-checking, verification, but a range of critical thinking techniques, I would argue, for that help us engage with and enjoy media and information, both safely and critically. But then we also use digital media ourselves for positive change. I know that Media and Learning as an organisation is very keen on the active dimension of using media rather than just learning about media. But the part of the bottom is a really important thing, which is why I referenced the Richard Hoggart book on the opening slide, The Uses of Literacy. You know, the uses of media literacy are, let's face it, mostly used for bad and for harm. So all of the problems that we would talk about as media literacy specialists, those problems are caused by media literate people, whether they are people spreading misinformation, whether they are people seeking to undermine democracy through rigging elections, harnessing data and algorithms for either corporate, commercial or sinister ends, or even radicalization. These are all highly media literate people. So the idea that media literacy in itself is positive is a questionable idea. What we need to do is combine media literacy with capability for consequences, and those consequences need to be positive. That's quite hard to teach, as you'll recognize. So these are some findings from an EU-wide study that we led on, which was around effective teaching of media literacy in Europe. Media literacy education, as you'll know, is fragmented. It's not taught as a discrete mandatory school subject in any EU country. There's very little adaptation of a media education curriculum. The only country with a designated but optional school subject for media literacy left the EU, sadly for me. And initial teacher education, therefore, is restricted often to the point of total absence by all of the above. So, you know, there's only so much we can control, right? Because without the policy level, curriculum level, assessment level, you know, mandate level, it's difficult to argue for digital media education training for teachers, but we have to because it's so crucial and important. So it's a fight worth fighting. Key findings also were that the field is moving away, this is the media literacy field, from competence models and protectionist approaches to more robust research that embraces the complexity of what I will call dynamic literacies. And this makes it more ambitious, makes it more difficult, but it's tremendously important that we see media literacy as a dynamic agentive space, not a set of neutral skills or competences that you either have or you don't have. Successful implementation of media literacy education, therefore, is facilitated by approaches to pedagogy that combine or cross boundaries between spaces and roles. I will talk about third space as a rich and fruitful environment for media literacy work. And there's a wealth of evidence of more formal funded partnership engagement. So media literacy educators arguably have to partner up and pair and collaborate, or should do, with more external stakeholders, other kinds of organizations to do the meaningful work. But there's evidence of this happening in the short term through relatively small scale, low-level funded projects, but not so much evidence of that in a sustainable, longitudinal kind of curriculum embedding way. So there's work to be done there. And we made the following policy pointers: make a clear connection between digital media literacy policy, curricula, teacher education, make those collaborations large scale and sustainable. We do need a formal school curricula for all students if this work is going to be developed fully. And that would be best served by supporting the inclusion of media literacy competences in the PISA evaluation criteria, because, you know, we live in a world where teachers and students and parents and all stakeholders, you know, tend not to see it if we're not measuring it in those ways. So those were the policy pointers we made a few years ago when we did that EU study. But I want to just problematize and challenge all of this very quickly now by showing you a film which at first, a trailer for a film, might seem like a strange choice. It's a film about an Australian mining company who want to mine into land that's occupied by Aborigines, and the Aborigines believe that the green ants dreaming is what keeps the world turning. All will be revealed in a minute when I show you this video.
We're going to be blasting again soon. You got to move. Boom, boom, quick, quick, understand?
This is the place where the green ants dream.
Ants? Green ants? Dreaming here?
Well, it's not visible, but there's nowhere else in Australia where the Earth's magnetic field is so abnormally distorted.
And you've measured that?
Yes, of course. And because the green ant is the only living creature on Earth with a sensory organ attuned to magnetic fields, like a small green living compass.
Okay, it's a film by Werner Herzog called Where the Green Ants Dream. The French postmodern, post-structuralist philosopher Jean-François Lyotard writes about this film in his book Le Différend, where he argues that one of the problems with kind of Western philosophical thinking is that we are focused on a kind of a logocentric philosophy of sameness, and what we need is an ethics of difference. Now, the media and cultural studies tradition would agree with that and would see media literacy as being about recognizing a huge diversity of truth claims and of ideologies and of perspectives and different views of reality. It would be very much against the idea of a fixed reality. But of course, the problem is, as we move into a kind of world of post-truth, we're now at the same time trying to help people to understand the difference between true and false. And we have a world rampant with conspiracy theories, which arguably use exactly the same logic as the post-structuralist theory, which media studies and arguably media literacy came out of. So we're in a very confusing space. So my argument is as follows. This is really what we need for media literacy. It's the famous painting by Magritte, "This is not a pipe." And I always start every media literacy training with this image and say, this is all you really need to know. Everything you need to know about media literacy is in that image. It's not a pipe, it's a representation of a pipe. So as we move forward, digital media literacy for positive change, first of all, of course, we need access, and that's more complicated than just having the technology. It's about informed access, educated access. Then we move into awareness. This is not a pipe. We develop that into capability to use our media literacy for things in the world beyond just the kind of internal thought process. And then we use those capabilities for positive consequences. This is some work we did with BBC Media Action, where we aligned our theory of change on the left-hand side with two of their key strategy approaches, strengthening media ecosystems and reducing information disorder. And if you look at the slides in your own time later, you can see how the theory of change explains how people becoming more media literate will make a difference in those particular domains. But I haven't got time to go through all of that now. I just want to give you the picture of how it looks. But if we go back to the analogy or the metaphor, I think it's an analogy of the vaccine, we can think about it in these ways. We have, access are your medical trials. Then people have their first shot, which develops awareness. This is not a pipe. People are making truth claims. Everything I'm seeing is a representation. Everything I'm listening to or looking at on Facebook is somebody's version of reality. Nothing is true. Everything is possible. Second shot gives you capability to take that media literacy actively into the world. And the booster shot is what gives you the ability to make sure that those capabilities are used for positive consequences, which is a moral and ethical dimension. So it's not this, it's not whether things are just true or false. It's this. How is the representation making meaning? How do I feel about the representation? How do I want to represent things myself, perhaps in different ways? How do we do it? I would argue we do it in an in-between space between home and school. So we don't equip people, young people, with media literacy. We recognize they already have it, but we create spaces where we can do meaningful work to repurpose, remotivate, to adapt and develop their media literacies into particular, more positive, perhaps consequential outcomes. Three elements that go with that are, we talk about literacies as dynamic. They're not fixed or static. You don't have them or not. We don't measure them and move on. They're always in flux. They're always moving. Talked about third spaces being rich areas for these to happen. And we do have new literacy practices such as curation that need to be taken seriously in the work we do. And our research says that the challenge, and this is the challenge for initial teacher education, of course, is to adapt our educational practices to free, agentive, social and connected learners from static systems. A static curriculum puts some young people more at risk, and agentive people are less vulnerable. So the difference between static and dynamic, I think, is really key in the way we go about this work. So media literacy equals capability. We take that forward into action. It involves of these things. I'll just leave that on the screen for a few seconds and move on. But crucially, before we can change the world, we have to imagine what a better world might look like. It comes from the work of Henry Jenkins and others. But I wanted to set this out in such a way that whilst challenging and ambitious and far-reaching, just puts forward the idea that teacher educators need to be trained to teach young people to use their media literacy for positive change, to be more agentive, active citizens, rather than just to develop it, from a blank slate. Which can be the problem with some of the models we use, which stick at the kind of competence and skill stage. full and safe access, critical awareness, the capability to use that actively, the critical understanding of the consequences, and then the challenge is to how to develop that capability with consequences, which is more about ethics and social justice than skills and competencies. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Julian. We'll just go back to the full screen. We have a few minutes for any questions. If you'd like to pose a question or raise a point with Julian, please use the hand, the speaker hand. If you know where that is, it's down at the bottom under reactions. If you would like to put forward a question or anything you'd like to say at this stage. Julian, that's really interesting. Thank you very much. Maybe I can start with a question to you, because on the one hand you say it's incredibly complicated. Yes, it is. And at the same time then, and I understand that you're a little bit dismissive then of maybe competence frameworks, but then how else, if we're going to introduce, for example, into PISA, which I think a lot of people would support you in that, how are we going to introduce some sort of measurement if we don't use those kinds of existing frameworks that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a tension there. I mean, the two things, you know, they're part of the same argument, but yeah, being realistic, there's no way that you're going to include, you know, some of the, how have you used your media literacy for positive change, and so, you know, as a PISA criteria, it has to be measurable in some way. I think there are ways to do it which are beyond technical and digital competence. They are more about action, and they are more about even if it's only about, you know, more the kind of creativity and production side of things rather than the kind of technical kind of base level. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a case of starting somewhere, right? So yeah, you would start with
some sort of the basic.
You start with validation and credibility for the field by having that basic entry level, perhaps competence thing. But like any educational practice, that doesn't suppress you from doing all the more far-reaching stuff in, you know, in the practice. It's a good question, actually. Yeah, I haven't got a very
well, I hate to kind of sound a bit of a smart aleck here, but in fact, it's the topic of our third webinar in this series is actually to talk about frameworks and models. So I think we'll certainly be coming back to it, because, you know, we're getting all this attention on the topic at the moment. But the one thing we need to have, of course, is some way of measuring what's happening that can be transferred across countries. But look, Julian, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions coming up immediately now. We will have time later on, and feel free if you have any points. Thanks, Howard. I see some interesting points coming into the chat. Please join in the chat as well too, and we will come back to that a little bit later on. But I'm going to move on to our second speaker, and that's Alex. We're really delighted to have you joining us all the way from Brazil this afternoon, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Sally, Chloe, and Marty for this kind of invitation. I'm thrilled here. And I will start here just saying that I'm wearing several hats. One is a researcher in AI and education in Brazil in Pontifical Catholic University, but I'm also serving UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance as co-chairman, international co-chairman for this period, and member of the International Council of Media Literacy. So I'll try to bring some, I think Julian made an incredible presentation, so I'll depart from his point, you know. I'll not bring so much concept, but I'll try to address this kind of how in Latin America mainly we are looking at the initial teacher training, I mean the university itself, but we'll discuss a little bit of media literacy as well. So thank you very much for invitation. I wrote an article for Media and Learning website. It was a kind of provocative, and I hope it worked, because I think we need a little bit to shape the initial curriculum for teachers all around the world. I have this experience in Latin America that I will underline here, but at the same time, I've been working worldwide for 10 years, more than 10 years, and I've been researching for more than 20, but working worldwide for more than 10 years. And I see it's a Latin American issue, but it's a worldwide issue as well. We've been with UNESCO in the MENA region in Europe, in US sometimes, and in the Caribbean, in Asia. And we see some similarity in the challenges in the initial teacher's training. So I address the medium is still the message, innovating in media education training, because we are living more than ever in a period that the medium is the message. I think more than McLuhan could imagine during the 1960s. Now it is more important to realize that we are emerging in media that combines the message within. And if we don't give this step, it's hard to understand what media literacy is and what we are addressing. I love the René Magritte quoting made by Julian. So it's ZeitGeist is the organization I run in Brazil. So we are a remote lab where we research, we make teachers training with debates. This is a kind of activity we have in Brazil with elderly. We work, I believe, and we work a lot in lifelong learning and media literacy within the lifelong learning processes. And actually, I host a TV show and a radio show in Brazil as well, where I try to bring these issues for the general public. Ce n'est pas un cachalote. This is not an onion, but just to say that I think the media literacy issue is kind of an onion. We need to peel it. And we have the very, very first peel. It's a kind of citizenship approach. We need media literacy to live within this world. It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter where we are living. There are some digital fluency, which is an aspect of media literacy that we need to develop in all ages. This is the address for lifelong learning importance. But we can peel this onion until its very first layer. And then there is the concept. And I like to drink or to feed myself within Charles Peirce, which the American semioticist, what I believe we need to understand actually the science we are living in. And again, the science that they live in the medium and they are the message. So if you understand that TikTok, for instance, is not only another social network, but it's based in short stories. And the narratives are encapsulated in short stories and in challenges. And that world where the young people see themselves within short stories, short videos, we're going to understand why this is important for the youngster and the students. So it's one important step of awareness, first of everything. So we can see media like the Frankfurt School back on the 60s. This is Frank Zappa, the American rock stars, when he connected his toilet into the TV tube. It's a kind of Frankfurt view for the TV. Actually, the TV has a narrative very similar to the narrative that internet's having nowadays. It started with before Sesame Street, TV and BBC and the PBS. TV was nothing to education. It was out of the school, out of the curriculums, out of everything. So we need a point that educators start to think about television as an important point for education, even for a critical view, or even to be appropriate of that, and to be part of that, and to be critical thinker, viewer, but also action on that, to use that as a meme, as a media, as a medium. So I don't want to look at the Frankfurt view of that. I want to look at opportunity and risk. Opportunity and risk, they come together with media, and media literacy is all about to set the skills for that. So I used to see the basic education like this castle. I always show this image for the audience, and I ask, what do you think about this image? This is an image in Scotland where the community called the Brazilian graffiti artists to graffiti the walls of the castle. And this is a problematic and very, it's not a very, I think it's a controversial image, because most of the people think it's a weird image because it comes with the with the classical art shocking with the contemporaneity of the graffiti, the culture itself, the zeitgeist, the spirit of our time itself. So what I mean is that school is living this moment, the school curriculum, because they are meant to be, to preserve some knowledge, like history, geography, and this kind of thing. But the reality is stronger than everything. Like Charles Peirce say, what we see is what is reality. So the graffiti is there. So the image of the school, the basic school nowadays, is confused. It's a little bit confused. It's controversial. Is my curriculum contemporary enough? But does he bring content? Does he bring really knowledge from the past? So it's a kind of weird situation. And here, so we need to deal with this controversial image everyday educators. I mean, we educators, you know, we need to deal with that. And media literacy is part of the zeitgeist. It's part of the spirit of our time. It's part of contemporaneity. And what happened in Brazil is that the initial teachers training are lag behind reality, is lag behind contemporaneity. This is some aspects of a research doing by Todos pela Educação, which is an NGO here in Brazil. So if you take the university, the pedagogy courses and education course, they are focused on research, but they don't have practicing too much. So sometimes we have great researchers graduated, but not very good teachers. They cannot even lecture sometimes. They feel difficult in lecturing. It's a lecture-based course. So rationalism, this is a mistake, and this is it's rationalism, not rationalist. But I mean, we don't experiment with the hands. We don't experiment the skills itself. A low use of digital technology. And this 4 point for me is crucial. There is a very instrumental approach for the use of digital technology in education. We don't look technology as language. And as Pierre Levy said back to the 90s, the digital is language. It's not a tool. Tool is a very poor adjective for technology, what technology is. We produce culture with technology. So technology is language. So there's no space for innovation within the curricula of the here in Latin America. There is a matter of time. I will not talk about the second graduation. I think it's not the space. And few space for debate contemporary issues within these courses. And the creativity, where is it? Actually, we don't know. There is not, definitely is not on the initial teachers training here in Latin America. So what in ZeitGeist we try to do it, and in UNESCO New Alliance, I'm trying to lead it as well. First of all, is to watch technology as means and not tools. And we need to overcome an instrumental view of technology. This is a society popular issue that we need to overcome. Learn by doing, PBL-based research or action. We don't know that it exists in the initial courses of teachers in Brazil. And PBL is the school, for me, is the school of the contemporaneity, is PBL-based. We need to work solving problems and working PBL. So media education is a key issue for contemporaneity, for zeitgeist, for me, for the spirit of our time. And it's a set of skills, not necessarily an issue and a content. So if we need to develop skills within our students, we need to develop ourselves these skills. If we learn media literacy only as a content, we will lecture as a content to our kids. So we need to think about media literacy as a set of skills. And this is very important. Hybrid is part of reality. I recommend, I don't know if you can see my small screen here, but I deeply recommend this book I'm reading right now. It's top 1 in Amazon, which doesn't mean anything about its quality, but I can guarantee it's a good book. It's Reality Plus from David Chalmers. He's redefining philosophically the concept of reality, hybrid, and this third space that Julian was talking about. It's reality. it's not a second-hand reality for students. It's part of the reality itself, and we must start to see reality as hybrid. So connection with the students' culture. Sally, sorry, I forgot to count my time here. Please, if you can give me an advice when I'm over, I will appreciate, okay?
Sure, Alex.
I'm connected with, we need to straight the connection, the bounds between what teacher thinks and the students wants to learn, and the students' voice and expression, and it's not in the initial curriculum. So I wrote a very provocative phrase in my article saying that the teacher lives in the 20th century. No, the teacher lives in the 19th century, the students in 20th century, in the 21st century, and the school in the 20th century. So it is true, because it's not it's a common sense, this one in Brazil, this phrase, that we are disconnected. The relevance of cultural studies. I like to bring art-based research when I talk about media, and I see Julian does the same. So I think when you think about media literacy, you think about ZeitGeist, contemporary, you need to address art as part of this, you know, it's not a separate thing. This is how to overcome, actually, to the instrumental view for technology. I see media literacy and innovation when I see the medium is the message. We need to innovate the medium itself, how to teach. And what I'm saying is that we doesn't mean that we need to teach online. Please do not understand this, that we need to innovate the way we are teaching, to use PBL, to be more hybrid, to use art, and to use other stuff. So I came from a community education-based experience back to the 2000 when I left BBC. I used to live in London. I worked at the time as an intern for BBC, and then I went back to Brazil, and then I realized that the neighborhood, the media, and the art, they are connected itself, because they are all signs of the reality we are living in. So I see education as a network that connects the neighborhood, the digital, and the art. And media literacy has to do with the three parts, the three bottom line aspects of teachers training.
We're just up on time, Alex.
Okay, I'll finish now. So just to take a look, everything I'm saying, Edgar Morin, that French thinkers used to call it complexity. And I think we need to address complexity, which is a concept borrowed from the maths. And we need to think reality as complexity and do not separate things when we teach and when we teach teachers. So art, city, and digital, for me, it's a side of contemporaneity. This is the side of contemporary. That's in how we learn. We learn the city, the art, and the digital together. I'll skip this. This is experience of, I'll skip too. Those are my contacts, so I'm finishing now. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much. I see Iglika is clapping using the Zoom clap function. Thank you very much. It always feels a bit cold-blooded when you come to end of a presentation. We can't clap, but believe me, we're all clapping, Alex. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
No, my pleasure.
Has anyone got any questions they'd like to put or points they'd like to raise with Alex? It's very interesting, this connection. I see Adeline, I see you've got your hand up. Where you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this great presentation. My name is Eleni. I work with lie detectors, and we are sending journalists to classrooms to have those discussion with the young people. I was interested by the point that you made about saying that technology should be seen as a language. And does that mean then for you, as a consequence of that reasoning, that the place that this should take in the curriculum is that of a separate subject, as a second language, or a transversal subject? That's to say, like we teach a first language.
Thanks, Adeline, for your question. Thanks for your words. I was addressing media literacy as a transversal thing, but we need to take care with transversal issues, because they tend to disappear in curriculum. They tend to have less attention than the things that are not transversal. I think media literacy needs to be everywhere in the curriculum. It's not a separate subject. That's why PBL is one key of that, because when you develop a project, you need to develop media literacy skills to research, to publish, to communicate your project. When I say a language, I'm using language in a semiotic sense, and not as a tongue or a language as another language, but in a way that it's a set of codes where we can use and produce culture as humans we are. So I believe in digital culture. That's what I believe, that technology is a language, and technology is a way for us to communicate. So this is the point I have underlined. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Thank you very much. We are going to move on. I hope we will have some time at the end. Just to remind everybody, we are recording the session. So if you prefer, everyone has the camera off anyway, most people do, but you can always switch off your camera. We will make the recording available afterwards. You can also see a transcript by switching on live transcript on the bottom if you'd like to follow that instead. And please put any questions or points you'd like to put into the chat. I see lots of points going in at the moment, which is great. Thank you very much. I'd like to move to our third speaker, and so I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Lina Pranaityte from the Heidelberg School of Education, and Lina is also one of our organizing group for the session this afternoon and for the special interest group that we've started in this area. So Lina, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the organizers of this timely webinar series. Most of all, thank you to you, Sally and Chloe, for your efforts in bringing together such an impressive group of international experts for an exchange. I am pleased to be here, and I hope for an engaging conversation with you all. My talk today will be from a practical side of organizing an international multidisciplinary initiative for a joint online module on a critical media literacy. For this presentation, to focus more on the practical side of drafting a program for pre-service teachers, I have structured the following 10 minutes in two parts. First, I will present who we are and why we do this. And in the second part, I will define our practical involvement, what challenges we face, as well as shed some light on media education in schools in Heidelberg. So let us start with who we are and why we are here. Heidelberg School of Education is a joint academic institution of Heidelberg University and Pädagogische Hochschule Heidelberg, in English, the University of Education Heidelberg. For the past 6 years, it serves as a platform for an interdisciplinary exchange and collaboration by combining the expertise of both universities in order to prepare future teachers in the best possible ways. Heidelberg School of Education also runs various projects to foster transcultural exchange and initiatives that support the digitalization of teacher education. For example, with a recently opened digital teaching and learning lab, an equipped space that enables collaborative forms of work, as well as blended learning scenarios, making teaching and self-determined learning more effective, and offers conditions for innovative didactic methods, as well as the production of diverse multimedia materials. All this is an important support for pre-service and in-service teachers in the area, but is space and the state-of-the-art technical equipment all that we need? With a sociologist and a political scientist as acting directors of the Heidelberg School of Education, we also emphasize and say, stay critical. In other words, while digital computer and multimedia literacies enable us to access digital media, use various devices, and search for information, critical media literacy teaches how to critically engage the consumer of media in reflective and interpretive ways, how to critically analyze, to quote Kellner and Scher, those relationships between media and audiences, information and power. For sure, critical media literacy is a complex field which encompasses diverse disciplinary perspectives: media and communication studies, linguistics, psychology, political, social and educational sciences, critical thinking, etc. Due to the fact that it requires such a multidisciplinary engagement, to my opinion, it might as well indicate its superpower, And by that, I mean that it can be applicable to a number of courses that are already taught. This approach of adding a layer of critical engagement in an already existing material will also allow to make it more context specific and responding to the changing times of the complex media ecosystem that we live in today. The suggestion is as follows. Don't start with complex ideas, but come armed with questions. So who has created the medium? How is it constructed and made accessible to you? How could you understand it differently? What values, points of view, and ideologies are presented or missing from it? Why was it created and shared? And whom does it advantage and disadvantage? German federal government Commissioner for Culture and Media acknowledges that, and I quote, alongside reading, writing, and arithmetic, media literacy is the fourth key qualification for a self-determined life, end of quote. This governmental institution therefore supports several initiatives, as one that I will introduce in a minute. Its latest study, released just last year, investigated digital news and information competencies among various age groups in Germany. What you see in the slide is an overall evaluation of media literacy. The respondents scored medium to low in almost all areas of competence and often lacked very specific knowledge and skills. The result has led the authors of the study to claim, and I quote, that citizens have been left alone for far too long to find their own way in increasingly complex media environments, end of quote. School education as well as adult education are indicated to be of priority here. To my knowledge, there are indeed a lot of sites, organizations, academic institutions, and media pedagogy programs in Germany. But what this conclusion of the ministry-funded project indicates, it is indeed that far too often individuals need to find their own way in the pool of links, suggestions, courses, and the like. In other words, they need to mine the internet themselves. To give you an example, in one school in Heidelberg, media competence education falls under the category of prevention events. That's how they are called. Media competence workshops under this flag are conducted for children at the end of the 5th grade, and it is held by, which is very interesting, the so-called school media mentors, the newly trained 7, 8, and 9 graders who volunteer and hold information workshops for 5 graders. In the 6th grade, there are also workshops held in cooperation with police representatives who speak about security in digital media, cyber mobbing, picture and data rights, possible criminal charges, and so on. In addition to these initiatives, the school also has a media mentor group specifically from parent to parent, and a teacher who is like a media ambassador for the whole school. We are talking here usually about one-off events that rely heavily on volunteering children, teachers, and parents. This is also a labor-intensive work for teachers in particular because the money for such programs needs to be applied almost every second year. I cannot generalize about the whole of Germany because its education is dependent on the federal lands, but this is just an example of an involvement with media education in one school in Heidelberg. From this example, we see that citizens of various ages might not necessarily be left alone, but there is definitely room for improvement. So as an academic institution directed specifically towards pre-service teacher training, Heidelberg School of Education currently is working in a joint multidisciplinary initiative together with the Teachers College at Columbia University in New York, which recognizes the need for teacher education to include critical media literacy as a basic competence to bring into schools. In cooperation, we are developing a joint online module which aims to adequately reflect German and US contexts and to be developed in participatory design process involving beneficiaries and stakeholders in education, primarily pre-service teachers, experts and schools, and in-service teachers from both countries. Practical side, people involved in this initiative are doing this on top of their full-time jobs. Thus, planning and coordinating a time that suits the majority to meet is the first challenge. Once we meet, the work is focused on trying to define common grounds and possibilities. We are currently in the conceptualization part of the online module, aiming to collect a list of committed contributors, while on the side we are also discussing such topics as, should it be a self-paced learning or a guided course? How to enable translation into multiple languages? Which audience do we see as primary beneficiaries, and what are the age groups? Is it for certificate or not, and can our academic institutions provide that? Which platform can we use because of different data protection laws in Germany and the US? And last but not least, how do we bring together both contexts in the best way? We see a little bit of an exercise already, for example, when we want to discuss the notion of race and its translation, or the term democratic values, which in the US often has a political implication with one particular party. So how to best enable these discussions and exchanges between scholars and students from both countries. We also see that we might need to pay an extra attention to moderation skills and debate culture that teachers need to have when they are discussing heated questions. Moreover, we would like to enable this in their competency and skill package. Our initiative is specific in one unusual way, I would say, because it differs from other majority offered in Germany in that it did not start with a media pedagogy at the center, but with a multidisciplinary approach towards media education. This corresponds to the diverse field of disciplines that critical media literacy approach represents. And this is also one of the factors why people are interested in our cooperation. It offers them new ways to think about critical media literacy across the curriculum. It thus resulted that our steering group includes experts on learning technologies design and metacognition, applied linguistics, ethnomethodology, and conversation analysis, culture wars and discourse analysis, modern political theory, film, international comparison of education and policy studies, digital and open education, as well as intergenerational learning and citizen science. In total, 5 members from New York and 5 from Heidelberg. Our additional circle of support people also includes in-service teachers, researchers, as well as students. We are still building our network, and we would be pleased if you signaled your interest in cooperating with us. I think I have done everything I could in this short time. Thank you for listening, and I very much look forward to discussion with you.
Thank you very much, Lina. Indeed, clap all around. Thank you. We will put, one of my colleagues, I'm sure, will put your contact details into the chat, because that is an open call to people who would like to collaborate with you in terms of what you're developing. I think, are there any questions for Lina at this stage? I think an awful lot of the questions you raise in terms of how you create such a module, an online module, are ones that everyone will sympathize with. Has anybody got anything they'd like to put to Lina at this stage? Maybe I could just ask a practical question, Lina. Are you willing to share your online module, or how are you thinking about that at this stage? Is it something that you think might be applicable to others or usable by others? Maybe it's an unfair question.
It's absolutely fair. And it's actually a burning question at the moment in our group, because we are discussing it in our past meetings and the one that is coming up. Because initially we created this idea of an online module just for pre-service teachers that are students at both of these institutions. And then the idea is, so why close it for, we probably should also open it for teachers. And if we open it for teachers, why not for students? And then, but if for students, how do we organize the content of it because of age groups and maybe certain materials that might be disturbing for primary students, for example. So it's still a work in progress, but it's definitely on the agenda.
And I think it's certainly a call out to everybody who's directly involved in initial teacher training that it's well worthwhile looking and seeing if these kinds of resources can at least be shared, even if amongst institutions in the same area. So, Lina, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you so much.
We will move on to our last, but by no means least speaker. So I am delighted to introduce you to Eleni Kyza from the Cyprus University of Technology. And she is going to talk to us for about 10 to 12 minutes as well. Eleni.
Thank you, Sally. It's great to see you all here. Thank you for being here. So I'm actually quite happy that my presentation is in this order, because then I can build on all the wonderful things that other presenters have shared with us today, including examples of how to engage in initial teacher education, and also, of course, the theory of change that Julian presented at the very beginning. So the aim of this presentation is to provide a very quick overview of the complex situation of digital and media literacy education in higher education settings, and especially in the context of pre-service teacher education programs, or as I will call them during this presentation, initial teacher education programs. So let me begin by providing an interesting backdrop, but kind of moving away from teachers, but also going to students who are so much connected to teachers. That of the situation with students' competencies based on reports, for example, by PISA. So the reports by PISA are used by the European Union when setting its goals for the next few years in terms of education, educational goals, and also citizenship goals. And they link citizenship and educational practices. So based on these results from the last PISA results, we see that more than 1/5 of 15-year-olds in Europe are categorized as low achievers in basic skills in reading, mathematics, and science. And in fact, we know that according to the EU Training and Education Monitor, the basic skills proficiency of youth has not improved during the last decade, and little progress has been made in that effect. And when we look at the countries that are part of the EU, we only see 4 countries meeting the EU goal of less than 15% underachievers. And then we also see that underachievement in some of the countries exceeds 30%, and that includes my native country of Cyprus, but also Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Malta. So then when we look at the targets as set by the EU, we see that this downward trend in reading, maths, and science. So this is about the basic skills. But now if we move to the digital skills of students as well, we'll see that based on this survey, the International Computer and Information Literacy Study, we'll see that most of the students, and there were over 26,000 students in most participating countries, and again, it's a limited number of countries. I think there were like 14 or 12 in some occasions, but all of these students were scored at level 2 out of the 4 proficiency levels, so at the lower end. So we also see that their digital skills, the students' digital skills, is not as high as we'd like. And one of the interesting findings in this study is that contrary to the popular myth that students are digital natives, there is this argument that students do not become digitally proficient just by growing up in a digital world. And it's an argument that I also ascribe to as well. So I would like to make this argument, this claim that, of course, education is quite crucial in preparing digitally competent citizens, or maybe just point is crucial in preparing citizens of this world. So it is really important to look at how we can lay the foundations, beginning with the initial teacher education, to help teachers become competent in supporting their students in what we'd like the students to achieve as well. So now if we turn to professional development to look at how teachers feel and perceive their digital competence and what their practices look like actually. So we'll see some of the results showing on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'll see that most of the teachers report that they use computers and the digital media to primarily present information through direct class instruction. Under 50% of these responses indicate that teachers use them to communicate with parents or to support student discussions. And then we see much less frequent use of ICT to provide feedbacks to students, to engage in students in collaboration, to mediate the collaboration between students and experts and others in the society. So we see that even though a lot of teachers are confident in their own basic ICT skills, they also, the areas that they identify in their practices indicate some gaps in what they need to be able to do to successfully support their students. So when we look at what the teachers do, we see that they are quite confident and able to find teaching resources online, to create presentations, but they're less confident in using collaborative tools, participating in online discussions of professional development using LMS, etc. So even though they do see this need for the use of ICT and the benefits in using ICT for their students and probably for themselves as well, they have some areas where they need a lot of support in order to be able to address those needs. But at the same time, also I would like to focus on the last part of my sentence there, of the statement. They also are concerned with the dangers that they see in how students use ICT. But they're not always able to support students in those respects, like, for example, the ethical aspects of using ICT and plagiarism, etc. So now if we go on to look at some of the models that are being used in initial teacher education across countries, we see that they vary from country to country, and of course there's a large variation, and there are also several tensions. So for example, one of the tensions that's coming up in certain countries, I think England including, is that there are multiple paths to becoming a teacher, and some of these are not accepted in the same way as others. So for example, initial teacher education sometimes moves away from universities, which has been the standard so far. And there are some several issues that need to be taken into account, or quality to be calibrated, etc., in terms of what is offered to the teachers. Another tension is that there's also usually an emphasis on content, or there's a discussion whether we should emphasize on content and whether we should emphasize on the pedagogical preparation of teachers. Some people also view initial teacher education as training rather than as education. And I use the term education as being more encompassing and including much more than just training on certain skills and facts that people need to know. And then there are others who address initial teacher education using a deficit model rather than using it as a built-in block of trying to engage teachers in an empowered way to help them create an empowered professional identity. So these are just three of the tensions, and there are several others, but I think that they express missed opportunities in what we do with teachers at the foundation of their studies before they actually go into practice. And I think that we need to find ways to address those. So when we look at the kinds of competencies and the ways that perhaps initial teacher education can integrate those competencies into teacher education, we can look at this categorization published in the literature that talks about professional digital competence as being able to be broken down to three different categories: generic, subject-specific, and also profession-related digital competence. And my own personal opinion is that I think that we all need to attend to all three of them versus just one of them, as we see in different places as well. But a fourth dimension also relates to what I think Julian spoke to at the very beginning, is a transformative agency, as something that we need to pay attention in these initial teacher education programs. At the same time, we have reports in the literature that say that these programs might not be preparing for what teachers need in practice, that sometimes they are too theoretical and they are not practical enough. But at other times, people are criticizing the lack of addressing the issues of responsible use of technology, the online risks, and all these recent, I guess, developments in how technology can influence us. And of course, children and students. So one of the other conclusions, I guess, by looking at the literature is that we don't have a very strong evidence basis in terms of empirical research that looks at how effective these programs are in different parts of the world. But we could say that research reports from different national contexts, and I just provide some examples from different countries where studies have been conducted, they appear to be converging and in similar messages. one of the astounding messages that we get is that the initial teacher education programs do not adequately prepare student teachers to teach media literacy, and we've heard that in the other presentations as well, that we need to take action on that. So for example, when we look at a study examining all the teacher education courses at 316 different institutions in the US, it was found that there was inconsistent integration of media literacy education in those programs, or fragmented integration as well. And similar results have been reported in Europe as well. And there are several explanations again on why this might happen. And except for two might be that there are mistaken perceptions that student teachers already possess these digital competencies. So this is akin to the idea of the teachers now being the digital natives. But also there is this lack of training to help students understand how media literacy can be integrated. So not just gain skills, but also see how they can integrate these skills with their teaching and their practice as well. So regardless, I would say that the student teachers seem to have positive attitudes towards digital media literacy, but they again feel that they are not supported enough to be able to use it and integrate it into their practice. Another dimension that is being criticized as lacking is the critical dimension in initial teacher education. Critical dimension in terms of the digital and media literacy aspects, of course. And we see that even in countries such as Canada, where media literacy programs are compulsory in K-12, it is reported that initial teacher education programs do not include critical media literacy courses. So there is this paradox that we have to find ways to address again. So in terms of thinking about the future, just to conclude, I'd say that we need to pay attention to the 4 dimensions of professional digital competence as described before. And also, of course, the theory of change that Julian presented at the very beginning is very important to take into account, theory of change for action. And we need to update the current initial teacher education programs and do that in a systematic way in order to be able to reflect the evolving digital ecosystem, which changes all the time. So these updates should address the proficiency and the competencies that teachers should have to be able to function as professionals, but also what they would need to be able to support their students develop the digital competencies they would like to see in citizens of this society. They could also attend to different types of media literacy. So for example, UNESCO talks about functional, critical, and civic types of media literacy. Last but not least, I think that it's very important to have assessments that enable evidence-based decision making, both at the local and national level, also maybe across different national contexts. So I would like to stop here and thank you all for listening to this presentation. I look forward to a continued conversation.
Thank you so much, Eleni. That was really interesting, and right down to the practicalities, I think, which is really interesting to come from what might be more of a theoretical approach to actually what the real needs are in terms of teacher education. So first of all, any questions for Eleni? Anyone got anything they'd like to raise? Please feel free to switch on your camera, by the way, because it's nice to see everybody now. We just have another 10 minutes or so to the end, so we'd love to see you all if we can, or a few more people. It's always nice to have people on with their cameras switched on. Any questions for Eleni based on that? Eleni, I was just going to ask you, I mean, you kind of came to the end, you said, look, these are the various different steps. If there was one specific thing you'd like to see changed, what would that be in terms of initial teacher education, if that's not too simplistic a question? The magic wand.
Well, the whole thing, I think we have to update, and we have to clarify our vision. And I think that what we're missing on many occasions is the vision of where we'd like to head, I guess, with the kind of skills and knowledge that we'd like our teachers to have. So I think that we have to look at what is offered, but as a unit. I think that what we do is that we look at isolated classes and courses, but then we miss the connection between them and the connection with the societal aspect. Like what would we like our students, but also our citizens to be able to do, and how can we connect that to what we teach at the university or other types of levels, I guess, for this.
Something is much more consequent, in other words, I think is, yeah. Eleni, there was also a question earlier on that we kind of went over simply because of lack of time. Iglika, would you like to ask that? It was the question about the idea, because on the one hand, we're talking about separate subjects, and at the same time, we're talking about cross curriculum. And would you like to put your general question, switch on your mic, and away you go?
Of course, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the very interesting, informative presentations by all of you. I'm thinking a lot about this subject because there is a consensus right now that media literacy and digital literacy need to be integrated. This holistic approach to put elements and develop media literacy in students through all the subjects in K-12. But at the same time, and especially observing the curriculum in Bulgaria, and as I can see, and networking with people all around the world, it's not country-specific problem. There is not enough time. There is not areas to discuss. And I think that to indeed develop the fundamentals of media literacy, starting with medium is the message, starting with media theory, from the last century, with John Culkin, with Neil Postman, and with the philosophy that is integrated, cultural studies, ethics, you need time. And I'm more and more leaning on the side that we need both. And I'm interested in your perspective on this, that we need both to gain media literacy and information and digital literacy and web literacy through all the subjects, but at the same time, especially in high school, to have it as a separate
specific subject.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Iglika. Any of our panelists like to pick up on that, the idea of one or the other or both? Or do you have any strong feelings? Who do I see with their mic switched on? Eleni, your mic's on. Yeah. Yeah.
I think for me it's easy. I think we need both. It shouldn't be just one. And it has to be subject specific, but it has, I mean, there is a place for more general, I guess, media focused courses as well that are not subject specific. There are so many issues that we need to cover and address, and we have to find ways to make space for those within the disciplines and also across disciplines. And I think Alexandre talked about that, the transversality, I guess, and just the risk of being lost there if you just do it one way or the other.
Yeah. I think you all have to remember about being realistic though as well too, because teachers and the curriculum is under so much pressure that we may not have the luxury of being able to have both. Julian, I see your mic is on as well.
Yeah, although what you've just said might... all I would say is that I think there's a difference with media literacy, you know, when we compare it to more kind of traditional print oral literacies where, you know, the job of teachers is to develop something that's undeveloped, because the people that we're working with have various living media literacies that they practice in their everyday lives. And that can actually save us time. I think one of the problems in the research I've done can be that teachers, for all the reasons we understand, they feel very anxious about not having all of the skills themselves, all of the wisdom to impart, feeling in control. You know, we did a project where we used a video game as a piece of English literature, and we asked English teachers to teach this game in the same way as they would teach Hamlet. And the game was L.A. Noire, so it had all kinds of narrative overlaps. It wasn't like a game like FIFA. It was a you know, very literary game. And the outcomes of the research were that all of the English teachers we worked with were very happy conceptually and textually with doing this work and seeing this video game as literature. But all of the problems they had were logistical. Like, I haven't got time to play this game. I haven't got time to finish all of the side missions. And how do we do it in the classroom? Do we all play it? You know, and it was the kind of classroom dynamics that got in the way of what we wanted to do. But also they were just so anxious about, you know, when I teach Hamlet, I've read it, they haven't. I've studied it, they haven't. a video game. And so I think that thing about third space, if you can find the confidence to do it, it saves you time. But it seems at the start like it's going to take so much time, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The investment in time at the beginning just really pays off then afterwards. Alex, I see your mic's off too. Your mic's on too. Yeah.
For example, here in Brazil, we have 147 projects for new disciplines on high school curriculum in the parliament. So it's not a Christmas tree. The curriculum could not be a Christmas tree or just hang one ball and one, you have to give an holistic approach of the curriculum, which is very important. And media literacy is part of the contemporaneity, as I said. So I think it tends to be everywhere. As a guerrilla strategic, we start in the after school sometimes to be aware of the importance of media, and then we jump into the curriculum and develop like that. But if you see in a systemic view, you can't put media literacy in things that you are already doing and developing skills in one hand. And if you want to go deeper in philosophy, remember that onion that I peeled. I think the philosophy is the center of that onion that I peeled in my presentation, because everything leads you to Socrates, and everything leads you to classic philosophy. So if you go deeper on that, maybe you can address in art or in cultural studies, but I think it's very important. But for example, I have an experience here in Brazil where the chemistry teachers teach the students how to chase fake news in chemistry and vaccination, and present this fake news within the subject of building up the chemistry formulas or algorithms. So they are developing a critical view on this information. At the same time, he's teaching chemistry. So what is important thing, and I think your question is very good, Elika, is that you need to think as skills development in one hand, and don't forget that skills development is really important, and also a content as issue as a rational and intellectual subject that you can go deeper and deeper and make people adjust it. And I think the big theme overall is critical thinking. It's critical thinking that is a subject that's too large to debate, and there are a lot of different meanings, but critical thinking within the curriculum needs to embrace media literacy. This is the perfect marriage, in my point of view. Sorry.
That's a good point to bring us towards the end, because we're just on the end of our time, and I wanted to tell you a few things just before we finish up today. First of all, it's a question to all of you. This is the first in a series of 3, and also first in a focus for us within the association. So we'd love to hear from you how we can do better in this area, what sort of a role, what sort of a function the association can provide to you by sharing information, maybe by building up collaborations amongst people who have a share of common interest in this area. So please feel free to come back to us. You can always, of course, you're very welcome to join the association. It's an open membership to organizations to join. You can contact us directly here in the Secretariat, and we'll help you out on that. We will also have 2 more of these sessions coming up in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Chloe. So you can see we have lots of seminars coming up between now and the summer, including the next one on virtual tour of advanced hybrid spaces. But the one for this group that might be most interest is the one on teacher education in this continuing this series, but focusing more on continuing professional development. We'll have several practitioners joining us, and also Davina Frau-Meggs, as I think many of you will know as well, too, has done a lot of research in this area. She's one of our speakers in the next session. And then the third one in the series, which is taking place on 20th of April, is more on frameworks and strategies. And I saw several references to Jeff Scher's work. He'll be joining us as a speaker there to talk about critical media literacy. We'll also have people from the Commission talking about Digicomp and the various different frameworks that are there. So those are 2 further sessions. We'd love to have you join us if you can. It is open for registration for anybody, whether you're a member or not. You're very welcome to come and join us. And Also, to those who might be interested, we're having our own conference in the face-to-face conference in Leuven on the 2 to 3 June, which is focused more on use of media for teaching and learning, and is open again to anyone who'd like to register. And you'll find lots of information about that on our website. You're also welcome to join and to enter our Medea Awards, which is the Media and Learning Association's annual award scheme for best use of media to support teaching and learning. And our entry close date is on the 17th of March. Please also sign up for our newsletter. It's free to enter, free to sign up at any stage. We have really interesting articles every month, and we'd love to have you join our mail list for the newsletter. I'd like to thank everybody very quickly. Thank you very much to Alex, to Julian, also, of course, to Lina and to Eleni. Thank you so much for this afternoon. And of course, to my colleagues here in the Secretariat, to Chloe and Matty and Jovi for their help as well. Thanks it. See you all in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.